Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Halifax Regional Council request a staff report by way of Transportation Standing Committee which contains options, recommendations, and best practices regarding 1. Amending the means by which Council manages appeals of license decisions, including but not limited to considering A. Change in scope of responsibility of the Appeals Committee to be clarified and possibly reduced to a strict review process. B. Transferring license review responsibility to a new tribunal for license appeals composed of lawyers or those with license experience. C. Transferring license review responsibility to the UARB. 2. Strengthen standards of conduct in the taxi bylaw and clarify the requirement for interim and permanent suspensions of licenses if these standards are not met. And 3. Request the Mayor write a letter to the Minister of Justice requesting clarity regarding whether the UARB could be responsible for license review.
Seconded by Councillor Mancini. Councillor Mason.
So the public, thank you very much, Council, for allowing this to come forward today. And the public normally doesn't see, it's on the website, but we don't usually read it. But I'm going to take a moment, I'm going to read the reason why I brought this forward that was on the motion paper. What citizens in HRM value is a taxi system that is safe for all. It is important that the public both know and feel the taxi system in HRM is safe. People should only be licensed to drive a cab if they contribute to the fact and perception that to the public that the taxi system is safe for all, and not if the driver's actions detract from that perception. Taxi drivers have a duty of care and must conduct themselves at all times in a manner which will maintain the public reputation of the taxi system and its ability to serve the public interest. The taxi system is a publicly regulated system and no one has a right to a license. The grant of license is a privilege that can be revoked at any time. HRM must take every step to ensure that what citizens value is protected and the highest standards are maintained. The administration and oversight of license appeals, including taxi licenses, is technically difficult and beyond the training and experience of most councillors. The process of licensing appeals should be reviewed and amended to reflect that. So I read that today. I'm going to bring up the agenda. I don't want to go long, and I could go long on this topic because I'm very passionate about this topic, but I want to touch on a couple of key areas here. First is, a lot of our, what I've heard from councillors and some people in the public is, that the criminal case is over and that it should be over for HRM. And I want to put that to rest by simply saying, the criminal case is different from the administrative law case, the civil aspect of this, right? The criminal case is, did he commit a crime? And the burden of proof they have to reach there is beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is a totally separate thing from, where we are at with the civil side of this, the administrative decisions makers that we are, whether or not they should have a permit or not. So when you're talking about a civil case, you're talking about the balance of probabilities. Is it more likely than not that the defendant caused harm or loss or behaved in a certain way? So it's as simple as this, guys, right? O.J. Simpson got off in the criminal part, but didn't get off in the civil part, right? Like, that's the difference, because there's a different threshold of proof. For administrative law, right, where we're at now, our job is to make sure that we are procedurally fair and that we have a really clear standard that we review against. I don't feel we have that right now. That's why part of this is to very clearly go into the taxi bylaw and make sure that we very, very clearly say what we expect. And part of that is the language that I use there about duty of care. Now, Collins Dictionary of Law says that a duty of care is a requirement that a person act toward others and the public with watchfulness, attention, caution, and prudence that a reasonable person in that circumstances would, and that if those person's actions do not meet this standard of care, that those actions are considered negligent. So I don't think we need to enumerate what in law, in the bylaw, that you shouldn't sleep with a customer consensually, drunk or sober, when you're driving a publicly regulated cab. I don't think that's a professional standard that we support. I don't think that we think that someone who has a license from us should do that. And if they do, I think we should take their license away. And that's where I think we need to aim to. There can't be, and right now I perceive there's a huge gray space between being criminally guilty of something and whether or not you should be allowed to drive a cab in the city. So what I think we need to do here is very clearly get answers on the two things that are in this motion. What are our standards? What do we expect from taxi drivers? What should the public expect from taxi drivers? And then the second question is, who does the review of an appeal? Right now, our staff are the first line. They make the recommendation and say, nope, You shouldn't have a license, you broke the bylaw. And then you can go to the appeals committee. And I'm open to all those different aspects, right? I know that some of the councillors, the UARB is not normally, they're not our natural friend, right, as council, and I get that, and I accept that. I see some councillors at that and laughing, but it had to be on there because if we're going to have a fulsome review of all the different ways that maybe we're going to change this, we need to ask that question too. But I think that the appeals committee or a tribunal like they have in Toronto are both options that we should explore as well, but I think it needs to be tightened up. Finally, though, the reason why we should explore, I think, tribunal and UARB, though, is, we have moved as a democracy over 200 years away from the legislature being the final arbiter, right? In England, the House of Lords is no longer the Supreme Court. They set up a Supreme Court. To the business people in the room, I'll put it to you this way. The people who do your books are usually not the auditor. Right? We make the laws. Do we want to be adjudicating whether they're being applied properly? I'm not sure we do, but we need to find out what the best practices are in other municipalities. We have to consider that. So remember, we're not making a decision today about what we're going to do. We're asking for a staff report so that we have all the information in front of us about how we can make sure our citizens are best served by the public taxi system that we license. I look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes.